what I'm hearing here is that people want the 19th. So the question is, do you want the 3rd?
I'll make a motion to. Or Linda, do you want to make a motion to the 3rd?
I'd like to make a motion to have add a meeting on 12/3.
I'll second.
All right. So all those in favor, say aye. Oh,
Aye.
that's Mr. Cerisi.
I'm not clear on the motion. Is the 12/3 in addition to the one we already have scheduled on November 19th?
That's correct.
So all those in favor of adding the December 3rd meeting, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. Great. Then we will have those meetings. All right. So that brings us to presentations. Dr.
First presentation tonight is from Dr. Kenworthy, Donna Sweet, head of high school guidance, and Dr. Denise Mansiri, assistant principal at the high school, and they are going to present to us some information about our guidance services at North Keystone High School.
Good evening, everyone. So as Dr. Ajay mentioned, I think periodically we like to just come before the committee and update on important information around testing and scores and things like that. But at least in the time that I've been at the high school, we haven't done a presentation like this where it's just a review for everyone in the public as to, what are the services that are coordinated through our guidance department. And, we're a high school of over 1,400 students, and so how do we try to serve the needs of each and every one of our students, the majority of whom are going on to a 4-year college track, but certainly not all, and trying to make sure that we meet all of those needs in between. So with me tonight I have Dr. Mansiri, our assistant principal for teaching and learning, and Mrs. Sweet, the chair of our guidance department. So they're actually going to take the majority of the presentation here.
Good evening, Denise Mansiri. All right, so being in charge of academics, I'm also in charge of the guidance department, and I'd just like to start out by saying that when I first came last year, it was, baptism by fire, and I would really like to say that Donna Sweet was the one who guided me through all the scheduling and everything like that. So I'm going to make sure that even though we are having, well, I'll continue here, we are who we are, this is how it's going to go, the overview is who we are, student services, the communications within the school and to the public, and special events that they do with guidance.
Denise, could you use the microphone?
Oh, certainly.
You can pull it with you if you want. Freedom to roam.
Like a show.
No,
Hold on. No, I'll leave it right here. It's a little contraption going on. So, who we are and who do we serve? It's broken up into 2 different levels. So we have the 9th and 11th grade, and we also have the 10th and 12th grade. That allows the guidance department members to stay with the students and also to make sure that the loads are very even, because in the senior year, and Donna will talk more about this, but in the senior year, there's letters to go out. There's all of the students that are applying to colleges and so forth. So that's quite a big load to have. So then we break that up. So 9th and 11th grade and 10th and 12th. And right now, in the 9th and 11th grade, we have Donna Sweet, the department chair, Emily Bell, she's full-time, and Joanna Norton, who is in for Mia Toro. Mia Toro is out. She just had a baby. And so Joanna Norton came in and is taking her place. Then in the 10th grade, we have Cindy Normand, Elizabeth Parvo Brown, who is in for Cheryl Dakotas Thomas, who is out on a medical leave, and Erin Ward. So as you can see, things sometimes are very transient, but we're able to make things work in there. And what I am going to do now is I'm going to pass it over to Donna to take over and let you know what we do.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to come in tonight. So I work with my staff. We get together weekly and have a common planning time together as a whole group. But we also have 2 smaller common planning times. So the counselors that are working on the 9/11 team will get together once a week and plan curriculum work. Now we're working on the gradual implementation for teacher evaluation. And then the other team will get together and meet as a small group as it pertains to those particular grade levels. So what we aim to do is at each grade level is to get out into the classrooms at least 2 to 3 times per year. That's a lot easier when the students are freshmen and sophomores because they have a lot more classes in common. So, for example, if we're going to go out and introduce some topics, how to be a good student or welcome to North Kingstown High School, we would go out, say, into an English classroom because all freshmen have English 1, whereas they might not all have the same math class. Some are starting at geometry, some are starting at algebra 1. So in the freshman year, we have the opportunity to go into 3 different content areas, which I have to say is a huge attribute to North Kingstown High School. Many of my guidance colleagues around the state are very jealous of that fact, that content area teachers are willing to share their classroom time, especially in the day and age of, the testing and everything else they need to get done. So we feel fortunate to have that opportunity to do that. And we do that at every grade level. It becomes more challenging as the students become seniors because the only class at that time we can enter is the English classroom. Because at that point, most students are done with their history class, most students are done with their science class, and students are at various levels of math. So English is the one area where we try to get in during the senior year. We also visit advisories 2 to 3 times per year. We do have the benefit of having our same advisories. The kids stay with their advisor for 4 years. They stay with their guidance counselor for 4 years, and they also stay with the same dean for 4 years. So really making a big school feel a little bit smaller, and we do go out and meet with the kids in that avenue as well. Not to mention individual meetings as needed by parents, teachers, student, counselor. We monitor grades at progress report time and at the quarter. We send home letters if we're concerned about attendance or if we're concerned about failure rates, and we communicate that way. We invite probably over 50 colleges to come in and visit our students. They come in predominantly heavily in the fall and make appointments through the guidance department. Ms. Mary Beth Budlong takes care of that process. And so we've opened that up to juniors this year. It was sort of a little experiment. We want the juniors, we want these reps who are coming into our building to be able to have a full audience. Our students are pretty careful about not going to too many, not missing too much class time. But it is a real benefit for these colleges to come in and see our school. It's not uncommon for our parent volunteers through the Links organization. They sit in and take notes on those meetings. So if a student can't make it, there's always a copy of notes. But it's nice for a parent to meet a college rep, and it's not uncommon for us to walk them around the building. Oftentimes these reps that are coming in to meet with our students and give presentations are also the person who is going to be reading the application. So it's, it goes right from the rep to the student, but it's nice for them to make eye contact with the student, so when they're reading an application, they can make that personalization. We do a ton of career exploration field trips. We do that through the Links organization. We do that also through Donna Hudson, who's our school to career coordinator. She helps us facilitate that. And then we have a lot of coordination with our student support services. We meet every Friday morning with the deans and other professionals in the building to discuss any students we might be concerned about, whether it's social, academic, or emotional. We work closely with our social worker, our student assistance coordinator, and our school psychologists, who are also located in the guidance office and the SRO when needed. We communicate with our families a number of ways. I love that little email Aspen function. If any of you have parents, you've probably received maybe a couple of annoyingly common emails from me, but when I get information, I like to blast it out right to the kids, and Aspen allows us to send to parents as well. So it's been a huge advantage to have that. I know listserv comes out every week, which is nice, but there's a lot of information there, and sometimes the things we get in guidance office might be timely. We started the Facebook page about 2 years ago. We're almost up to 500 likes, which is good. I don't know how your Twitter is doing, Dr. Kenworth. Is it doing okay? Not quite 500. Okay. So that's another valuable resource. We know a lot of parents are on there. Actually, demographically, most of that 500 are parents. We have the guidance website, which we are always aiming to improve and keep up to date. We have the listserv items. We go out to class assemblies, age appropriate when needed, if not multiple grade levels at a time. We send out at-risk letters. We work with other departments. We're always revising that program of studies, listening to the needs and wants of our students, listening to what the demands of college are asking for, the workforce, what skills they're looking for. So we work with individual departments. Since I've been department chair, I've been here since 2005. This is my 3rd year as department chair, and I don't recall a time before when we did that. It's nice to have that communication with our colleagues and see both sides of what happens during scheduling or when kids are selecting courses, or sometimes why things run and why they don't run, or maybe the choices that students make. We also have articulation agreements with Johnson & Wales and CCRI, our two organizations where students can leave North Kingstown High School as a student in good standing in their senior year, and they can start their freshman year of college, and those credits count in both places. We usually have about 3 or 4 students per year who choose to do that. It's at the cost to the family in that first year, though Johnson & Wales does a very good job of helping. We also work with South County Community Action and organizations like Job Corps to help our at-risk youth in vocational and workforce readiness. After hours, we do quite a bit at night when no one thinks we're here, but we are, depending on the age of your children. It starts off in the fall. We have a senior parent, well, it starts even before that. In August, we have a new student transfer day. This school year, we had over 50 transfers come into the district, just at the high school level, many of which were juniors and seniors. I think the guidance counselors are very conscientious that those students feel welcomed. There's a lot of different reasons why those students are here. They could be NK residents choosing to come here after trying a parochial school or a private school. Many are affiliated with the Naval War College. Some of them are just transient families that are moving. Homeschooled students have decided they'd rather be in a public school. Then we have a senior parent night. That's where we give a big kickoff of what this senior year will look like for families, how we do the application process. We'll follow that up with financial aid night in December. So once we get through the application process, we explain to kids and parents how they're going to pay for it. So we have a speaker come in. March is a big month for us. At the end of March, we have a post-high school planning night. That night is meant for 9 through 12 graders. We encourage other districts to come. We also encourage middle school kids to come. We'll have about 60 vendors that come in. We try to keep it an equal balance of work and college. So it's geared towards everyone, every grade level. We want kids trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up before they go off and spend money at college to figure it out. We do a freshman orientation, transfer orientation. We do an alumni visit day that's coming up soon where we have recent alumni come back and speak to our juniors and seniors about what life feels like and looks like 2 to 3 years after they've left us. We do 8th grade shadow day in the spring. We also do an orientation and parent night for our upcoming 8th graders. We have honors night. And we've been doing a great career panel speaker series with the Links organization. Jennifer Gormley's done a really nice job. Last year, we had 4 different nights. We'll have 4 different nights coming up in the spring. Very informative, and it's so great to see so many eager parents, community members want to come in and share their knowledge with the kids, and, you know, the understanding that the path to where they are wasn't always a straight line, and your occupation sometimes has twists and turns, and it's good for kids to hear that, because I think they get a little intimidated once graduation comes. They feel like that gasp of air, like, oh my God, I got to know what I want to be for the rest of my life right now. And we all know that's not always the truth, that'll take its turn. So that's a great series. It's the last Wednesday of every month in January, February, April, and May. So join us. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions? Yes, Mr. Mudd, and then Mrs.
Yes, sir.
Parkin.
I noticed you had a relationship with Johnson Wales
Johnson Wales.
and a couple other schools.
Yep.
One and Rick?
Not-
RTC?
Well, yes.
Junior college.
Say it again.
Is that the junior college? Rick?
At CCRI and Johnson & Wales, we
Yeah.
have the agreement where kids can leave.
Are you trying to explore one with the University of Rhode Island at all?
Yes. We do actually have a student currently who is concurrently enrolled. So she's here part of the day, and because she's looking to take courses that we do not offer,
But so kids want to get engineering courses and
yes.
things like that?
That's usually determined by the college, whether or not they'll take kids while they're still in high school. We would rather enjoy it. The one program that I failed to mention was Rhode Island College. We now have a number of courses in our program of studies that have been approved for Rhode Island College credit. It's called the Early Enrollment Program. Rich Garland has done a fantastic job. He's in our careers department. He has about 3 or 4 classes that are approved. Paula Schiavone has a class approved, and now Norma Chiesa is in the process of getting a course approved.
What do we need to do then to help URI join the group?
Yeah. Yeah.
What can we do to?
What can we do? Well, we've had some very good articulation agreements, conversations with them already, I know, especially with their engineering department, and I know our world languages department and their world languages department are.
Nursing and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. With the proximity, it's silly not to.
Well, please let us know if we can.
Absolutely.
Expand that.
Absolutely, we would love that.
liaison.
Thank you.
So I think this question falls under the realm of your department. I have middle school kids, so I'm not, the high school
Sure.
things are all new for me. But I did have a parent approach me and was curious about, apparently you added a weighted GPA to the transcripts this year,
We did.
which were positive in most kids' transcript, but had some negative implications on others.
Sure.
And I was wondering if maybe you can give some background or enlighten us as to what the reasoning was behind adding that to the transcripts this year.
Sure. That's a conversation that had been happening since I got here in 2005. We as counselors often share information. How do you do your rank? How do you do your GPA? How do you determine your valedictorian? Those are common conversations we have in all of our professional, conversations. The conversation has always come to us via colleges, URI specifically. Two facts about North Kingstown in the relationship with URI is, first of all, North Kingstown High School sends the most students to URI out of any other high school in the state, to my knowledge. And the second one is that North Kingstown High School gets the most Centennial Scholarship money, to my knowledge. Those two statements have been made to me by URI. So when URI talks to us, we listen. And what happened with them, they have been asking us for years to go to a weighted GPA because they have to compare our students to every other student. And what was happening is that we weren't quite getting as much or as many admissions into particular programs. As we all know, pharmacy and engineering have gotten much more competitive. And so they were noticing that trend in admissions. What happened last year while I had seniors on my caseload, in October, I got a frantic phone call from URI because they had changed the criteria for their Centennial Scholarship. And it wasn't an admissions decision, it was a financial aid decision. And so the powers that be at URI had made the decision that now that Centennial Scholarship money was going to be weighted based on a weighted GPA. And the first conversation they had at the URI admissions office was call North Kingstown High School right now and find out where they are with this. And so if they had their way, we would have made the change last year. None of us were comfortable with that. So we had a lot of conversation about it, talking to our colleagues, talking to other schools. Diane Del Greco was a great advocate for it. She's a parent and a community member, also works at the URI admissions office. And she had given us a lot of comparative schools to look at and how she gave us a lot of background information. So based on that information, we made a decision that we had to make the change. We had a parent night in September. We invited all parents, not just senior parents, but all parents. But we understood and appreciated that the senior class was going to be most frantic about it. Because as you mentioned, it was favorable for most kids, but some kids saw a drop. I personally sat and went through each kid's GPA. I had the old GPA and then the new one with the weighted GPA. And I can say in most cases, if a student dropped, it was marginal, 0.2 points, 0.3. It was not anything huge. We modeled ours after the most universal scale. It's a weighted GPA based on a 4.0 scale, but meaning that an AP, and I think you have it in front of you, an AP course could earn you up to 5 points. So what was happening at places like URI is the average enrollment in order to get into the pharmacy program was 4.2. So our kids, who are rock stars, our number ones and twos, might not have gotten in because the highest GPA on an unweighted scale was a 3.95, I think is the highest we've ever gotten. So the short-term change is hard, and there's never a good time to do it. If we could have implemented it in the Aspen program to maybe start with a particular class, I don't know what the programming of that would have been. It would have been very challenging to have 4 different systems in place at once. At some point, we just had to pull the ripcord and just make the change. We were advised by URI, and we had several conversations with some other admissions officers to put the disclaimer that you see on the front right there where it talks about the GPA changing. policy. We wanted colleges and parents to be rest assured that we made this change during their senior year and that colleges were to take the transcript as the transcript. And we acknowledge in there that we report the higher GPA. So if a student's unweighted GPA was the higher of the two, that's what we reported, was their unweighted GPA.
Okay.
So that it wouldn't have a negative effect on any students.
Okay. Yeah, because my next question was going to be, for those who it affected negatively, were they given an option to not have that weighted GPA on their transcript, but you answered the question at the higher.
Yeah, it wasn't an option. The transcript does show both. With 371 kids in the class, it's 371 choices, and then it's 371 minutes of the guidance counselor not sleeping because they wanted to make sure they got the right one. It was just simpler to we'll go with the higher one with the disclaimer. Colleges understand this. And, in fact, most colleges recalculate anyway. So, I spoke to a college yesterday, and they're like, well, don't worry about that piece because. And we had a similar circumstance happen. This class of 2013 that just graduated, they were the last class to go through that had the change in passing grade from 60 to 70. So, that change had a little ripple effect, too. It's just colleges get it. We explain it. They understand.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for
You're welcome.
taking the time to come give the presentation. Just to pick up on a few things you said. So would you explain kind of what the purpose of the advisory thing is, and so how you sort of measure how effective you think advisory is from your perspective?
Well, I don't think we're in a position as guidance counselor to measure the effectiveness of advisory. That's not our role. I'm going to be honest and tell you that I want advisory to stay because that's where we have access to kids without impacting their curriculum. It's 20 minutes a day, every day. The goal was that there was one adult in the building that saw that child every day for at least 20 minutes. The way our schedule is, that wouldn't happen other than period 5, which is an academic class. So by having the advisory, we're able to have a nice little triangle of three people who get to know a child well. And so they're in that advisory every day. That's when guidance counselors access students. It might be when the school psychologist, a social worker would access a kid in a sort of social setting. You're not pulling them out of math class or English. But I think that's really the role of the administrator to estimate the effectiveness of it.
So picking up on your point of career exploration, I had a couple of questions. Do we do any, I know you mentioned some of the groups, but coordination with the VOTEC schools that our kids attend?
We do. We coordinate right now. We have sort of a grandfathered class coming out of Coventry. Those students had started their vocational program in Coventry, but then the regs changed that we now facilitate to Charahoe. We also have some students working at Rogers. They're on the partial day, so they're able to come here, have their academics here, do the vocational programming there. The benefit to that piece is that they graduate as a North Kingstown High School student. If a student chooses to participate in a different career technical school, they become a graduate of that school, which is fine, but that's a tough choice for some kids. They don't necessarily want to leave home because, they have this aspiration to do something that's not offered here. We also recently met with the folks at Job Corps, and I'm hopeful we're going to have some further discussion, but Job Corps has also offered to facilitate some of our students in a vocational setting.
So picking up on that, too, you mentioned, so from your perspective, so what are the skills and competencies that colleges and or the career side of the house say they're looking for?
I think they want to see kids who are self-advocates, that are resourceful, that are able to problem solve, are able to articulate and to communicate what they need or when they're in trouble and need help. I know my guidance staff and I are always advocating that students learn to have those skills for themselves. I know when I speak to students and speak about their letters of recommendation, that those are skills. A college can look at an application or an employer can look at an application and, what's there is there. Your GPA is your GPA, your SAT score is your SAT score. But those letters of recommendation can be an incredible tipping point. I love to be able to say to a kid, that they advocated for themselves or that they've had some challenges. I don't think any college or really an employer wants perfect. They don't want a perfect, neat, clean kid. They want someone who's fallen down a couple of times and knows how to stand up and brush themselves off and knows how to overcome an obstacle and knows how to troubleshoot or knows how to anticipate, what a problem might be or, what the solution might be to a problem they see coming. So those are skills that, our kids and we as adults always need to refine and keep progressing towards.
So building on those skills, where would you see us potentially moving in terms of even students on the college track, in terms of getting more experiential learning things integrated into their experience here? Like moving some of the learning outside of the high school.
Yeah. I'd like to see our internships become more fully developed. I know the Rhode Island School Counselors Association just met with some professionals out of North Attleboro, and one of the recommendations we made, and one of the recommendations I would ask of our community, and especially our folks at Quonset with such a diverse job market there, is that they offer sort of 1-week camps, like that can be accomplished over February vacation or April vacation or during the summer. University of Rhode Island provides a great camp called Transportation Camp, and it's just everything that has to do with the industry of transportation, and that's engineers, that's manufacturing, that's retail. There's so much in there that kids don't know. They don't know what exists. If a student tells you they want to work in the medical profession, they think nurse or doctor. They're not thinking of the 90,000 jobs in between, So if we have, community facilitation of different ways that kids can go out and understand what a job is. Many of our kids' work and getting there might be difficult, but if it's sort of compact and put together. When we have the post-high school planning night in the spring, one of our freshman parents came forward, Nancy Sisson. She's from the University of Rhode Island, works in their career counseling department. And one of the things they just did at URI was they have a career fair. And what they do is they take deans from every college, and they have a fair in the student union, and the undeclared students, the undecided students can go there and sort of go through and talk and learn about the different occupations. Well, if you're kinesiology major, you can do this, this, and this. So she reached out to us and said, what can I do to help you? And I said, I want you to do that at North Kingstown High School. Bring a dean from all of your departments. And it's not about URI. It's about the major. It's about the field. What does it look like? You can be, you're great in biology. Here are the 9 careers you can do in biology. So, facilitating those kinds of opportunities would be helpful.
So on the guidance website, who's got ownership of that?
I guess at the end of the day, it probably falls on me. It's sort of everyone's puppy. Everyone contributes to it. It's not the most ideal format, if I'm being honest. It's not always easy to update and maintain.
I don't. Anybody? Because I just have one more. The committee will indulge me. So, no, I appreciate you all taking your time. So I'm the one who asked for this.
That's
so I have
okay.
a lot of questions.
That's great.
So on the Alumni Visit Day,
Yes.
which is kind of a question I asked, so I didn't know we were doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we get a good cross-sectional stuff, but or maybe I just miss it when it's publicized. But I'm wondering if, besides talking to students, what other feedback mechanisms you have with recent graduates that get filtered back to the administration and to you all about, like, do we have kind of an outreach or post-graduation kind of attempt to find out what our students' first-year experiences are?
We don't have a formal process or
Yeah, which is why I think, so the Alumni Visiting Day, that was something we just started a few years ago. We picked the day before Thanksgiving because, our biggest draw there is the more recent grads. So that's a day that most students are back for. So we've been this is probably our 3rd year doing it. So the last couple of years we averaged over 50 students who, we just invite them, they can drop in, on that specific day. And we allow them, even if they want to visit, again, that's the one day, and we kind of try to, that's how we try to sell it. So when they come in, one of the things that we do is we do have a form for them to fill out, and we do capture demographic information and email addresses and all of that, although that's probably the group that, we have the most recent information on. But that's kind of where we're looking to take the conversation. Is common in a lot of private schools and even, some public schools, it's just been up and running of having active alumni associations. I'd love to see something like that grow. We're just looking for, the right way to go about getting it done. We just, every 5 years or so, it seems the school had a history of, collecting information from alumni. We use a company that essentially all they're looking to do is sell a hardbound copy of the compilation of all the alumni information from people, but the benefit that we get is we get the information. So we just undertook that process, and we have all that recent information. I think I've seen the final drafts, and according to them, over 4,000 alumni responded. So hopefully we'll be able to, again, we'll have that information electronically. We'll be able to build a good database, and it's just trying to figure out, okay, what can we do with it?
My last question. So have you gone and looked at the SurveyWorks data from the most recent SurveyWorks?
I have, or we'll do that through school improvement process. And I'm not sure what in particular.
Well, I was just curious because I guess maybe, some of the feedback in terms of the college and career readiness, some of the percentages that talk about whether the classes are getting them ready, talking about their choices, if you have some thoughts on why it's hovering around 40%, disagree with that. And so, because my experience with my daughter has been very positive with guidance and choices and that. So trying to get a feel of why, given what I think is a pretty robust program here, why we're sort of on par with the state average in terms of those areas.
I would say two answers to that. One is that a lot of the things that, we've even presented tonight are things that have really come together over the last few years. So maybe, we'll now start to see, more and more of our current and future students who realize the services that we're providing in that area. Secondly, we could probably be doing more. We're always looking at ways to improve in those areas. So, I'm sure. But like you said, we're hovering right around the state average there. So, it certainly bears future conversation.
Thank you for your time. I think it's an important area, so thank you for taking the time.
Mr. Buscardi.
I just have two quick questions. You said you've been in as the department chair for 3 years. Mm-hmm. What changes have you made when you became the chair? What things have you added, deleted? What changes have you made to the program?
Well, one of the things we did right away was we changed our course load, our caseload, how we manage our students. In the previous system, we were 9 through 12. Well, we've had a couple of different systems since I've been here. Originally, when I got here as a guidance counselor, I picked up students in their junior year, and then I saw them through to graduation. And we had a guidance counselor who would pick them up as freshmen and take them through sophomore year. That wasn't ideal, because what would happen is by the time I got them as juniors, their high school was half over. And so there was only half the story being told. Then we went to another system where we split the alphabet, like so many schools do, where they go 9 through 12. Keep in mind, contractually, teachers have caseload caps. Guidance counselors do not. When I first got here, we were over 300 kids per guidance counselor, and now we hover someplace around 270, 280 per guidance counselor, per full-time guidance counselor. Personally, I'm a .4 guidance counselor, a .6 department chair. So we really looked at that because we wanted to give quality in care. We were doing 4 different things. We had 6 people working on 4 different things all the time. It was crazy, just the time we spent trying to organize ourselves to do what we had to do. So then we went to the model that we have now, which I think is the supreme model to have. It does 2 things. It keeps you with your students for 4 years, and it keeps you doing 2 things at once. So as a 9/11 counselor, those 11th graders are okay those first month or 2. They're okay. It's getting the freshmen in, making them feel comfortable, answering their questions, reassuring their parents, and sort of welcoming them here. And then as they start to settle in, we transition over to our juniors right around this time of their year and start to get them ready. Then I stay with them until they graduate. So it's nice to have that 4-year span, and I'm doing two things. I'm 9th and 11th, and then I will follow them through. It also gives our counselors a break from doing senior applications. It's a high-stress job. When you have that many students, the two things you're dealing with quite a bit are numerous colleges, applications, lots of letters of recommendation, deadlines, financial aid, and then we're worrying about that population who's may not graduate. And so you spend a lot of time on that. My guidance counselors are pretty caring and conscientious people. They carry it home with them. They really do. They think about each kid and who makes it and who doesn't, and what they could have done. And so, there's a burnout factor there. So it does give those folks a chance to have that break when they go to 9/11. It also keeps all 6 of us doing the same thing, but at different times. So in that way, it's been good. I think we've done a lot more articulation with different resources in the community. We've had much stronger communication with our colleagues and how programs are run. Prior to that, we didn't have that. We were just a department, and really the guidance department interfaces with everybody. We deal with parents, we deal with students, we deal with kids, we deal with community members, and it sort of all comes together right there. So it's really important that we're consistent, that we're fair, and that we're articulating well with all of those people.
The other question was, you said, you talked a bit about the internships and how you wish they were a little bit more broader, deeper,
Yeah.
just had more meat on them. What, if any, interaction do you have with Barbara Jackson? And
I met with her today.
And how do you guys collaborate?
We don't collaborate with her as much, though she's in our Rolodex. So if I had questions or I had a kid and I'm like, what do I do with this little guy? She would be a person we would call. I think more often than not we call Martha Pugh over at the Chamber, or we'll call Jennifer Gormley, or we'll tap into Donna Hudson, our school to career person, and get those conversations started to get kids placed in various organizations.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Mrs. Aventaro.
Just a couple quick points. I support the 4-year advisory because I've seen how they follow the kids through 4 years, and that connection with one person, I think, helps. When you talk about maybe thinking about surveying the kids in some way when they're first-year college students, I was going to suggest, rather than ask them open-ended questions, because kids don't take offense, but they tend to delight in slamming, especially in anonymous surveys. They love doing that, according to my son. But you might want to make it a question that's more like, what was the biggest factor at North Kingstown High School in your school choice or occupation choice, so that they have to come back with some information, some substantive or positive information. And just thank you very much. This was really informative. You guys do a lot over there at that office. I'm glad to hear all about it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Are there any other questions by the committee? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
The next presentation, we're going to keep Dr. Kenworthy on the hot seat here. He and Mr. Haig and Chris Madoyan from the North Kingstown Boosters would like to make the committee aware of the needs of the North Kingstown High School football field, turf, and track.
So we're going to shift gears a little bit, and one of the things with my role is I get to oversee everything here. So while the main focus is on academics, certainly, and I always stress that with the students. There are a lot of other things that go into the high school experience, and athletics, and certainly here at North Kingstown High School is a big part of that. So I'd like to start out, if I could just put you at ease a little bit, and say we're not here to ask for money. What we want to do more is get a conversation that's already out there. It's been out there since I took over as principal 4 years ago, but it just seems to be one of those conversations that we talk a lot about, but it doesn't end up going anywhere. And again, so above everything else, I think what we're hoping for tonight is that this can be the impetus of taking that conversation to the next level. And again, we're gonna present you some information. We're going to talk about a lot of positives with our facilities, and we have, in many ways, a lot of great facilities when it comes to athletics here. But there are some improvements that we could make to take it to the next level, and that's really what we're always looking to do for our students and our student athletes. So we're just hoping that you can listen to the information that we present, and going forward help us problem solve around these areas and what we can do to improve. And in some cases, we're going to point out some areas where we have to make improvements because we're not going to have any choice. Certain things are just coming to the end of their usable lifespan. But, we'll also hopefully be able to show you how other communities and more communities, even here in Rhode Island, are using this same kind of moment that we're at in North Kingstown to really propel and make some upgrades to take things to the next level. So with me today I have Mr. Howie Haig, our Director of Athletics, and Chris Madoyan, our Booster Club President, who the Booster Club is certainly right there with anything we're looking to do athletically, and I know in this case will be as well, and Chris will just say a few words about that. So Howie has the brunt of this here.
Switch. Thanks. I think important to note, one, we're not looking for money. We just kind of want to open this discussion. I want to go through some of the things that, Dr. Kenworthy said to kind of move forward and improve things, but also just to maintain where we're at right now. We've got one of the top schools in the state. People come here. I view athletics as kind of the front porch of the school where academics is the core, but it's really when you pull into the parking lot, you see the sports programs, you see the stadium, and we have a phenomenal stadium, with the amount of bathrooms we have, the amount of parking we have, the central location in the state. So those are some of the positives, and we want to be able to kind of, keep it that way. So some of the issues we want to talk about, right now I've had Cape and Island Track and Tennis come out and look at our tennis courts as well as our track, and they were the original company that did it 12, 13 years ago. And they're doing a full write-up for me, but the net of it is 6 years ago we had a resurface done. It was done improperly. There was no rubber put down, and we know that because North Kingstown was spelled wrong on our track 13 years ago, and it's still spelled wrong. So if they put new rubber down, it wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to see the spelling errors. So he explained all this to me while we were out on the track and went through it. He was the guy who owned the company back then when they put it in. He was not the person who we hired 6 years ago to resurface it. So essentially, we're looking at a pretty major track replacement right now. So instead of, a resurface where they would go and lay rubber on the existing track, we're looking at ripping up what's there, because if we go over what's there, they won't guarantee it. The track will bubble, and there's other issues. So they said, they'll charge us for it and they'll do it, but they're not going to guarantee it, and they didn't think any company would. So that's where we're at, but that's being written up. Some of the other issues right now, we have a lot of teams that travel off-site that wouldn't have to travel off-site. We have soccer who practices over at Wilson Park. So we're talking, in the course of a season, 50 to 60 practices per team. We're looking at softball practicing over at Ryan Park. We're looking at baseball practicing over at Licio. And one of the reasons for that is the lacrosse team uses the softball backstop kind of as their lacrosse practice field. And the reason I believe that has evolved is the softball field is illegal to play on because it has a grass infield, and softball's played on a dirt infield. So when they installed that, they either didn't know that or maybe that wasn't the case, 12 years ago. One of the other big issues we have is the safety on the back JV practice field. They designed this with a hammer cage that throws directly onto the field. So if I blindfolded all of you and had you walk across the field, I guarantee half of you wouldn't be standing by the time you got to the 50-yard line because there's such big ruts in the field when you walk. So, we've had Jim Simmons' landscaping class out there. Coaches have been out there filling holes, but it's impossible to keep up with it. Maintenance does it as well. But, when it's game time and we have to play back there, we got to make it safe for the kids. So, we kind of improvise. That's why I have white paint on my new shoes from earlier this year. They had just painted it, and we were out there filling holes. So, it's one of those things that that's not really a nice to have. We have a great field back there. There's great bleachers for parents to sit. Everybody comes, and from afar, it looks gorgeous, but when you actually get out there, the field is pretty bad. And it's almost impossible to maintain, to expect the maintenance people to go out there and fill all these holes. So the Hammer location just isn't ideal, and it almost, renders that field useless. Field hockey, they use the outfield, which I believe is on a septic system in the JV baseball field over there. And there's plates in the ground. They're about that big, and the kids can step on them, twist their ankle. There's also a whole area where stumps used to be that's unplayable. So the stumps are cut down just under the grass, but you can, if you walk over it, they can't, go out of bounds in that area. They twist their ankle. There's kind of like humps everywhere. And then the tennis courts right now, I had them look at them. Again, if you're standing as a bystander, I actually thought they were beautiful when I, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and then I actually went out and played on them. And the two in the middle are great, and the two on the ends, the ones farthest down towards the admin building, they have, 2-3-inch cracks in them that run north-south. And the nature of asphalt and settling is once a crack starts, you'll see it in your own driveways. It continues forever. No matter how much you try and slow it down, it'll always continue. So at some point, we're going to be looking at, possibly repairing those cracks. This company can repair them. They'll give you a 2-year guarantee. They say most people get 4 years, but there's significant cracks. So I haven't seen the estimate yet on how much that costs. But at some point, the courts are used by the town a lot. So those are some of the big, kind of issues facing us. So some of the solutions, obviously a track resurface. We've got synthetic turf that I want to talk to you guys about, renovating the softball field, skinning the infield, leveling it a little bit, being able to bring the softball team back, to that area. Move the Hammer cage. I had a kid do a senior project last year on a couple of feasible locations for that, and we think we have a decent solution, and possibly, renovating the tennis courts. The biggest reasoning for the track we went over, I did ask them statewide, where does our track fall? And they said the bottom 30%. So they said we can't, give you a number like you're 30th, but they said probably about 30%. The good news with that is it's just surface hardness right now. So it's basically like running on hard asphalt. So, we're talking about stress fractures, we're talking about shin splints, things like that. The track itself isn't cracked anywhere. There's a couple, I guess they ran an aerator over it 3 or 4 years ago, so there's a bunch of holes cut up in it in some area. But other than that, the track itself is in good shape, which is why we don't have to rip up the base underneath it if we resurface it. So, we're definitely looking at something in the near future for a track, and I do have some numbers on that I can share with you guys later. So turf, it's kind of small if you can't read it. The primary concern for me is the safety of our athletes. If we had synthetic turf, it's not a nice to have anymore. Any district that's looking at doing a major turf project now is going forward with this because it's been proven time and time again over the last 10 years that it is becoming safer for the athletes. It used to be the other way around. Like Hendricken, had we put it in 12 years ago, it would be a concrete base with almost Home Depot-like turf over it. Now, the technology has come so far, it's proving safer than grass, than a maintained grass field, so that's a positive. As well as now, where we normally practice, where it's risky, everybody's going to practice on the turf field. So we'll be able to practice field hockey in there, lacrosse, football, soccer, and I've talked to other schools on how they manage those time slots, and everybody can get in there. As well as games can be played in there, JV games can be played in there. Wickford Middle School, Davisville Middle School soccer games can be played in there. Things like that can move off the grass. The field use and availability, classroom use, PE can go out and use these things. There's unlimited use for the fields. And weather delays, we have had pretty good weather this fall, but whenever we have a real wet series, you can play the games in the rain as long as it's not, the ball doesn't become too slippery, but it's the fields stick just as well in rain as they do in dry. So there's no danger from, that you run into it with a natural grass. What we've studied so far, and the districts that I've looked at have done it, both in this state as well as other states, they've pretty much determined that the lifespan of the turf pays for itself in maintenance savings over an existing field. So really the question is, if the initial, egg is X and, this piece here will pay for itself. Where do we come up with the funding for the other piece for the initial cost? But it's, no matter whose numbers you use, everybody seems to be able to come up with a cost justification that you can't ignore, that there's a lot of money that we put into that field in paint and cutting and fertilizer and time. And then when you look at all the benefits of safety and everything else, that's why everybody's moving to it, both in this state and out of state. And there's money out there that you can go after, people that are, willing to donate towards projects like this. So some of the schools in the state, there's a good list of public schools, private schools, and then there's 4 or 5 more that are underway. And I know there's 4 or 5 more that are in this process of talking to you guys and kind of getting the ball rolling. So, some of it could be marketing driven. The companies are pushing it pretty hard, but the data is all over the internet about the safety, about, and these aren't numbers coming up from turf companies. These are doctors that are tracking the types of injuries that are coming in and so on and so forth, proving that it's a safer surface to play on. So, that brings us to the funding piece, which, like we said, we're not looking for any money right now. What we kind of want is just to start this discussion and hopefully get your blessing, or at least, an agreement that you would talk about this and whether it makes sense to go any further. We've brought Chris Medoyan along. He's going to come up and talk to you, but we envision that the Booster Club would have a piece in funding this, almost on like an annuity type basis where they would agree a certain amount over time. We're hoping that they would help us with the initial phase of looking into it and having a company come in, if you guys gave us that, go ahead, that we could start kind of the process. And, everybody seems to be doing it through some kind of grant money / private campaign. They name flagpoles, they name stadiums, they have naming rights on, anything you can think of in the stadium. And a lot of companies put their name on the scoreboard and so on and so forth. And I'm pretty confident we could run some fundraisers and like a brick fundraiser and some things like that, and we could come up with a good chunk of this money. So what we would be looking for from the town would be, the track piece, as well as what we could come up with, maybe you could help with, like, what does it cost to run that field, like a number that we can all agree on, like, yeah, that's conservative, and we believe that we will save that over the life of this field, and that's kind of the piece that we'd be looking at from the town. The other thing that we do have in there is, you can rent the field out. My feeling is, the safety of our kids, let as many groups in town use it, kids organizations, so, it becomes a central point and a real, kind of front porch of the whole town. But there are, adult groups out there. They're renting Worldwide of Indoor Sports at $100 an hour, $75 an hour. There's groups renting East Greenwich. I've got numbers coming in from East Greenwich on how much they charge to rent their field, in the summer. Camps are running on it, And a lot of our teams are going to rent space at Worldwide of Indoor Sports. Our field hockey team has practiced up there numerous times. Our soccer team was up there last week preparing for the state championship because it was raining, so we paid for there. So, it's already kind of proving like this type of facility, would definitely be a huge benefit. So that's it. I'm just going to introduce Chris real quick, just to kind of, show you guys that we do have their blessing to kind of, utilize them as one of the fundraising arms, as well as they have a huge member base that we're hoping we can tap into, to both help us fundraise and come up with some ideas. So before he comes on, do you guys have any questions for me?
Mr. Mudge.
Excuse me. I think the first thing that we have to do is immediately put in an estimate to repair the tennis courts. Should be in the budget. That's a maintenance item. That's all you should have to do. Okay. So let's get an estimate, put it in the maintenance budget. And I'll be supporting that. Also, I think it's time and I've said this in the past, and I completely agree with you, the payback on AstroTurf is probably in the neighborhood of like 6 years now, maybe even better than that.
Yeah.
In my view, we ought to get a project going and put the AstroTurf in and get on with it. We've waited too long, and I would suggest with the Boosters Club as well. Let's get us some estimates. Let's go to town council if we need to. We can get a bond. Nonetheless, the town does have a good reserve fund, which I believe some of it belongs to the school committee. Yeah. We can go to the town and tap the $8 million, $9 million that they have there, especially, like you said, you've extended this thing, okay, to maximize your school, facilities and so forth, and 100% for it, let's get on with it. I will also say that this school, just to substantiate what you're saying, has less athletic space than the previous high school was here.
Yeah.
People don't understand that.
We have
Okay?
very limited field space. out
Yeah,
there.
absolutely do.
Yeah.
And in addition, okay, the old field, in addition, had both the football field and the baseball field kind of integrated in the light, so you could use the outfields for practice and so forth and so on. People don't understand that. And so I totally agree with you, especially because we've grown, from way back when we started this in the 70s, when we lit the old baseball field and the football field, and everyone used it, Pop Warner football and this and that and so forth. But I think it's a worthwhile thing, 100% behind it, and let's get going.
Thanks.
Peg, you said the cost to maintain these fields are dramatically less than a grass field. What kind of numbers do you have to substantiate that?
From what I've studied so far, over the lifespan of 10 years, the turf lasts anywhere from 10 to 15 years, depending on UV exposure and use. So, I have a paint budget, so I know how much we spend in paint, and on that particular field. I've talked to Dave Young, so I've gotten some, hours from him as far as how many, what equivalent FTE it takes per week to do, that in season, and then there's a lull time. So based on that, over 10 years, we're in the $300,000 to $400,000 range conservatively. So that doesn't include what I would need help with is I don't know fertilizer budgets. I don't know, maintenance. I think you're still going to have to repair the lawnmowers and all that stuff, so I don't think there's any savings there. But I do know that, when we have games coming up, there's 3 guys on that field. When he first told me 30 hours, 40 man-hours a week on that field, it seems excessive. But when you look at how long it takes them, they're out there at 7 in the morning, and 3 guys, it'll take them an entire day to paint lines on that field by the time they put all the stakes and do that. And sometimes they do it twice a week, when the grass is growing fast, and they have to cut it twice a week. Especially with field hockey, the grass has to be a certain height. And otherwise, Julie McGuire's not happy. The ball rolls 3 feet. So they cut it, 2-3 times a week during the season. And those are the numbers Cumberland used for their track. I've seen some numbers from other districts in other states, and they're all in the, 350 to 800,000 is the range.
I guess my question really is, what's the net? I mean, that's what it costs the grass field. What would be the annual maintenance cost for a non, I don't want to say AstroTurf because that's not existent anymore.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Turf field.
From what there's 2 or 3 different ways of maintaining them. One of the costs which would go into this project is the machine to do it, and it basically is a golf cart that you drive once a week over the field, and it places a powder and cleans the granules. With that, the net is $350,000. 300 to 400 based on 4 or 5 that I've looked at. So that is a net figure. So they're looking, somewhere around $50,000 to maintain it over the course of 10 years.
Including the equipment?
No, not including the initial cost of the equipment. But like I said, I don't have any hard numbers. I don't know if there's 15 different pieces of these equipment, that you can choose from, or whether it's one. So I'm just using numbers that I've gotten from LaSalle. I've gotten them from Classical. Steve Tremblay actually came from Classical, and he was one of the ones that helped the turf project up there. So he's been good with, getting me some information too. So that's why, we didn't want to come in here and ask him for money and talk a lot about numbers, because I don't have great concrete numbers for you. All I have are ballpark figures right now, of how much total project, total cost savings, and I just know everyone I've seen has significant savings, like I said, in the $300,000 to $400,000 to $1 million, and the $1 million is crazy. There's people that think they can rent it, $50,000 a year, and I don't think that's going to happen, but on the conservative side, you have to figure you're going to make maybe a little bit of money, and that money would go in a fund to then replace the turf in 10 years. So, but that's what I want to pursue more.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Howard, thank you for presenting this overview. It's helpful to kind of see both short-term and long-term where we are as far as maintenance and capital improvement, where our needs are both short-term and long-term, and a lot of this stuff I was not aware of. One question I have, and the reason I ask is to just hopefully solicit more community involvement if the district were to go ahead with some of these capital improvements, and we talk about fundraisers and things of that nature, and hopefully to be able to solicit more community involvement should we decide to go that route. As far as the after-school hours use of the track, obviously when we have better weather, is it used much by the community, at the walking track? Or not much?
I don't think it's used a lot, but I see, I would say, anywhere from 2 to 5 people on a daily basis. When our track teams are out there, I don't allow anyone to be out there just because the kids are all around and safety. I am here, I'm not here that often on the weekends, so I can't comment. And when I am here, I'm usually inside. But when I drive in, there's usually 2 or 3 cars, and I do get calls maybe once every other week. Is the track open? I noticed the gates shut, but I believe I can still go in there. And so I know people do use it. The tennis courts get extensive use. Almost every time I pull in, there's people out there playing tennis that aren't students, that are people in the town.
Yeah, I'm just curious as far as, obviously not only school use, but community use as well, as far as, how much use is actually being gotten from those areas, and, what type of soliciting campaign we could have with the community at large. So, thank you.
Welcome.
I saw Mr. Jones' hands. I will say, Mr. Ceci, I was one of the people who would walk the track just about once a week with my son as he would come in and run the hurdles. And it's almost, we always would have at least one other person who was there joining us. So, and we always found tennis balls on the track, which we would then attempt to throw back. Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Haig, and for teeing this up. And I guess editorial comment first in terms of, I know later we're going to talk about the SIP plan, and the SIP plan ideally, I think by the town, 25,000 and above. But I think from the athletic and even the larger co-curricular side, I know we talked about instrument replacements and stuff like that. I think there's that smaller amount that we as a committee need to be thinking about setting aside on a yearly basis, so when the goals come up or instruments come up or something that we don't hit, one-time expenses all the time, whether it's creating an athletic reserve fund or some others. But I guess I've got the mentality coming from Vermont town meetings where we put aside a little for the backhoe and thing every year. So I think this committee should take a look at, creating these sort of reserve funds for those gap kinds of things. And as Mr. Mudge said, thinking more about the annual maintenance kind of stuff and sort of bringing these into more align with I won't say black transparent, but more of a formal way of capturing these on an annual basis and communicating that to the town instead of saying, all of a sudden, boom, we've got this big project that we have to do this year. So I guess my other comment to be would, since you're sort of in the initial stage, is, there's a lot of local communities, and East Greenwich is a good case study of problems also with the turf thing to sort of learn and not repeat. But, to get to Mr. Brisgarden's point, there's been a bunch of communities that have done a lot of life cycle analysis. East Greenwich, Connecticut had a whole task force. They spent 2 years on it, and they talked about things like, MRSA and sort of that kind of stuff that maybe certain turf does, environmental concerns about whether the right infill and the stuff that bleeds off is going to have environmental concerns. So, besides doing all the life cycle stuff, and I guess my recommendation would be is, let's steal from the communities that have already done this kind of homework. Sure. So we get a broader perspective of just, it's this savings. And I wouldn't discount, the replacement cost estimates in terms of, I would go with the manufacturer warranty as opposed to, what they guarantee was maybe a better projection of when Sure. fields start to fail. So we sort of think about that as you do it. And like you said, there are some communities around here that have done it, obviously to get a sense of maybe the more public schools who have done it and how they did their funding thing and reaching out and finding that. I would say also that from our perspective, I think 3 years ago or 4 years ago, the town had this as a ballot initiative to turf, I think, McGinn Park, and it failed miserably, as I recall. And I think one of the issues is that while we may say, and I think you're right in thinking about the entire community usage, and I think one of the failures of that initiative was, thinking about, I don't think they thought about the school department and the school usage and other stuff. So I would say, let's also involve the town, because at least 2 years ago, the Asset Management Commission had in their budget $40,000 to do in theory, a survey of all the town recreational use. And so, again, I think the more we think about, the town space and the town usage, just like we're thinking about what youth groups or others could use this, can we bring the town in and maybe partner with them and say, this is not a bad idea to think about our entire community need for athletic and recreation space, and maybe turf fields are part of that solution, and maybe the ideal solution for turf is here and some other stuff. And I guess I would say, just without seeing how you've thought about it, I mentally think 3 football teams, 4 soccer teams, field hockey, lacrosse, which all seem to be in the same, mostly in the same season.
Yeah.
In discussion we had about preserving kids not losing the ability to get after-school work, as opposed to going to training. I just mentally thinking that's a lot of teams training on one thing. So maybe we need to do that partnership, because Wilson Park is still going to be important, or these other spaces are still going to be a necessity, even if though we can get more matches here or other stuff. So, I know the timing's kind of awkward, and we can't change when Ryle schedules seasons, but, I'm just, again, mentally thinking we don't want teams practicing till 8 or 9 at night either. So.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say that this is like the #1 democracy project for everyone's junior year. Either you're going to redo the turf, or the track kids always do to get a new track, because it's like the #1 injury is their shin splints, and that's all they complain about is the shin splints. And then I know that when I'm in lacrosse season, before our games, we go down to like the little sand hill that's down there, and we fill up a little wheelbarrow, and we bring it up, and we fill in the holes that on the field, because you twist your ankles, and then the refs yell at you, and they tell you need to fill it.
And that's on the game field.
Yeah, on the game field.
Yeah.
And so we have to come up there before a game, we fill it with sand, and the refs get all upset, and then during practice, we'll be down in the practice field, and we'll have the baseball kids yelling heads because the balls are coming at us, and then we have to leave the field because then the boys across team wants to practice there, and then we go over there, but then the track kids are there, so it's like a mess, and there's holes all over the place, this is...
I didn't pay her to say that.
That's all character building things, in my opinion. That builds character.
Everyone just been waiting for it, so...
Yeah, yes, she is right. My son's democracy project is on resurfacing the track. Other questions? I'm sorry. Mrs. Avanzato, and then...
Yes. I'm interested in seeing some of the numbers, hard numbers, about other districts, how they've done in terms of how they've saved. Because that'll be a huge selling point, I think, for people. Is to see the maintenance costs all in, everything, and I know you've got the painting, you've got the people that are working on the field, all the other things that they do, the fertilizer, all of it, and then, actually have a comparison. It's obviously not guaranteed, but it would give us a little bit better idea. I couldn't really see, because I can't see the light, how many, I'd also like to know how many public schools have been able.
I think it's 6 right now.
Really? Okay,
so
that's
there's 6, and then we have Narragansett's maybe a year and a half where we would want to be in a year and a half. That's where they are now. They've raised maybe about $500,000, towards their capital campaign, and they've, have a bond piece and they have a capital campaign piece. Let's see, other public schools. Johnston is pretty far along, although they are getting a big chunk of it from the landfill side, because it smells, so they're giving them synthetic turf. And is there one other?
Yeah.
Oh, you got it up there.
Yeah.
Oh, Lincoln, Rhode Island is looking at it as well.
Okay.
You know, and they're a little maybe halfway between Narragansett and this meeting that we're having. You know, so. But, you know, as I talk to the ADs at the different things that we go to, it's kind of on everybody's, how did you do it, you know, what are your numbers, what kind of maintenance, you know, what kind of revenue you're bringing in. Everybody's kind of starting to have these discussions because, you know, I think there's so much data out there that makes sense. So, you know, unfortunately, I don't have that yet, but
Right, we're
I
just
will.
starting.
Yeah.
I figure.
So.
Couple quick questions. Do you think there'd be a willingness to rent it out on the, because I know that's been an issue in the past.
I do. I don't think it's probably, you know, 12 years ago, I think it was sold. You know, I was just starting to coach here then, and it was kind of sold like we could get all the big tournaments in the state, and I think we could still get some of those, but I don't think that's where your revenue is going to come from. It's more going to be from a men's soccer league that wants to hold a game here. It's going to be from URI lacrosse that would want to play on it or something like that. You know, it's going to be from, like, Lead the Way as a field hockey group for young kids that makes money. They're a for-profit type, you know, organization, and they rent East Greenwich's, you know. So it's going to be groups more like that, you know, that would come. But I don't have a great idea yet as to how much. In fact, I kind of want to leave that out because it's so unknown. You know, so if we could make a justification and then know, well, we'll make a little bit of money, but let's kind of leave that out for right now.
I agree with
you
that
know.
when you said that earlier. I don't think that's a main piece of this.
I don't think so
Or it can
either.
be, because we
Yeah.
don't want to rely on something that we might not get.
No, I think it's more once you get it, you realize how much time you're going to actually have to rent it out and then come up with a plan that, you know, still allows for the maximum usage of the town, and then, you know, no one's going to use it on, say, a Sunday afternoon. Well, that's a time we could rent out, you know, something like that.
Obviously, the funding and the issue of the money is the biggest issue for everyone. Looking at the things you have listed here are the options. School district takes on full cost. No, not so good. The second one, bond money, that's, the bond, you know, maybe a hybrid, like you mentioned earlier.
Correct.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that's what some other districts are doing, because bond, again, you know, we have to make sure we're looking at our, and I guess the town will have something to say about that as well, looking at our debt to bond ratio. I agree with you, Bob, too, about trying to do a coordinated look at this, because
Yeah.
the town has to be a part of it, the fields in the different parts of town, you know, what makes sense, and then
And-
just getting a few more numbers.
I think
but-
some of it is, you know, we kind of need to do soon. And then if you're looking at a track or a resurface and don't look at turf and figure out a way to maybe include this all, you know, once you put a track in, you're not going to want to put turf in, or you're going to have the aerator holes on the track. No matter how well they say they can protect it, they won't. You know, it would be very difficult, you know. So I think it's a good time to just try and bring it all together and see if we can do it, you know, and see if the numbers make sense.
Howie,
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of good news here, because the council actually approved the old, you know, the putting, you know, a bond up, okay, for Davisville Middle
Okay.
School, which was really the wrong thing to do, in my opinion. But, and it should have started down here, and it's unfortunate that the town council at the time, and those folks, didn't communicate with the school department
Yeah.
about doing that. And I believe that that's the case. But, you know, it's a really important thing that you touched on, too, that shouldn't, you know, really let, you know, slide by. And we have a limited amount of athletic space. So it's not necessarily when you determine the cost of what the maintenance is going to be. It's going to be the usage per hour per kid and the cost per hour per kid. Because you're going to get a lot more uses in there. You're not going to be paying maybe to go up to, you know, the soccer team has to go and practice over here or over there or whatever. Those are a lot of the intangibles that people won't see.
Yeah.
And again, the most important one, I believe, I'll go back and give you another example. You were here 12 years ago. Remember we had the state playoffs here? We let the state use it?
Yeah.
We couldn't use a football field for the next 4 months.
Right.
Okay, because you know, it really got clobbered in a storm.
And if we had a rainy fall, we wouldn't be able to use that football field now.
Absolutely. So
you know? Yeah.
the cost per student per hour, if you may, is just going to be so great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not so great. It's going to be such an advantage to us that we're
Yeah.
just going to get a heck of a lot for the bang for the buck, as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks.
So keep on it, and if I can do anything personally to help out, you can rely on me.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
All right, are there any others?
So, I'm just going to introduce Chris.
Chris is going to tell us where we're going to get all the money.
Yeah, exactly. I wish I could do that. I just wanted to, come up and say that, we're here as a Booster Club. We have a fairly large membership. We have a very dedicated, enthusiastic group. We have a lot of hands and feet that can hit the road and go out there and do the research. Absolutely, we're here to help in whatever way we can monetarily. And, yeah, the Booster Club would, as we've discussed with Howie and with Dr. Kenworthy, what we can do to contribute some money towards this project. But I think more importantly what we can do is, we can have people out there doing something if we have to go out and look at ways of raising money in some sort of fundraising way. Because we understand that paying for it, Linda, as you say, is going to be the tough part about it. I'm encouraged by some of the comments you've all made. I think there are a lot of good things. Mr. Jones, about what we can do about discussing it with the town. When Howie and Tom mentioned, we wanted to discuss this, we kind of divided, and I made a couple of phone calls. If you talk to Cumberland and you find out how they pay for it, it's far different than possibly East Greenwich. You can go to Middletown, and everybody understands how that was paid for. Salve Regina paid for that so that they could play there. So there's lots of different ways, and I think we have to figure out to possibly be creative in how we come about funding this. But we're here to support it. As I say, I offer to speak with any of you and what we can do more in terms of helping the athletic department. I think this is just one way. So I won't take up any more of your time. Feel free. My information's out there. Reach out to me if you'd like to discuss it. I'd be happy to sit and talk with anybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have a couple other things to mention here under recognitions. Louise Danette asked me to recognize that Chartner's Farm has donated a number of small trees and shrubs in the front of Quinnesset Elementary School. And so they are very pretty. It was the sort of thing it was something that one of their teachers is a member of the Chartner family, and they were able to get that donated. So she wanted me to make sure that I mentioned that today. Dr. Auger, I know you have some stuff, and then I'll...
Yes, I'd like to begin by congratulating Chelsea Campbell and the North Kingstown Business Club for their first place finish at the Bryant University, Mr. Jones, Bryant University Bulldog Challenge this past weekend under the direction of Mr. Rich Garland. And you want to talk a little bit more about your experience with that, Chelsea?
I just wanted to say that it was awesome because they took us on like a tour and everything, and they spoke to us about it, and well, we won first place, so that was probably the best thing about it. And we studied case study, and we had to put together a big presentation for it, and we sent it to their professors that were there, and then they judged us, and they decided who won first, and we came out of 12, I think it was.
That's awesome. Yeah, good for you. I'd also, I was at the boys' soccer game this weekend, and it was a very exciting game. I kind of wish obviously North Kingstown had come out on top of that, but either team could have. It was that close, and that ball was bouncing back and forth. And it was very well attended by a lot of people in the community. So congratulations to the team nonetheless for a great season. Also, last item, well, two items. We congratulated Sally LeVake and Mary Barnes for winning Teacher of the Year tonight and ESP of the Year. Had a nice reception for them before the ceremony. And last week, I was part of a visit from Congressman Langevin, who visited Stony Lane School, and he went from classroom to classroom, visited every classroom, in fact, and talked to them a little bit about how proud they should be of their National Blue Ribbon School recognition.
A couple other athletic things. We had the JV girls tennis and the JV girls soccer team who won the states. We also had tennis doubles Grace Callahan and Lucia Bollebrook, who came in first in states. So we are inviting them to come to the school committee in December. Jamie Hazen won the girls freshman states for cross country. But we are also inviting in December the unified basketball team, which came in first place in states. And they have all been contacted, as well as their coaches. So I think I'm not sure if that's the first time one of our unified teams volleyball. Did I say basketball? Oh, well, that's because I had a bias. So I had a son. No, I had a son who played basketball, and they wanted to win state. so that was my that's my Freudian slip. It was the volleyball team, the unified volleyball team. So, Mr. Jones.
Actually, I'd say the chairperson covered all the other groups I had, so was going to mention. So thank you for covering that. No, that's fine.
All right. That brings us to our presentation, end of presentations and recognitions. Do we want to listen to citizens' comments before we go out?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Just to let everybody, we have an executive session that we have not finished yet, so.
Nobody there? Okay.
Mrs. Johnson, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Jill Johnson, 102 Sidot Drive. And I just noticed on the consent agenda that one of the items was the purchase of some interactive smart boards for one of the schools that was privately funded. So I think it's great. I love technology, and I think it's great that we're bringing those into the school. I know in the past, PTOs have purchased smart boards for other schools. So my only concern and point I wanted to raise is I just hope that all the schools have the opportunity to have this type of technology, and it isn't just the schools that get the funding or have PTOs that have the money to afford it. So just wanted to bring it up so that we're making sure that we don't get down to the haves and the haves not based on funding and financial ability of the parents.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. All right. Is there anything else that we need to, or the committee would like to go over before we take a break go back into executive session? This is one of those things that I did not talk to Christian, our videographer. So we take a break.
Are we going to come back and see?
And we are going to come back. So we have to be very conscious of our time.
Yes.
Okay? All right. Thank you.
Consent agenda is going to take a long time, I feel, unless there's something we need done tonight. I mean, I don't know.
That's a good question. Is there anything on the consent agenda that has to be approved this evening? Because if there is, then we can approve that, and if it's something someone wants to talk about that doesn't have to be approved this evening, can we not hold that over?
Unless,
Well, I guess I would say, why don't you exempt the items you want to exempt, and we can
We'll
exempt
see.
the rest.
Okay.
Yes. So, Bill has exempted C. Is there anything else to exempt?
I just, exempting B, I actually just wanted to make a comment on that.
Okay.
motion to approve the non-exempted items on the consent agenda?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item number B.
Just very quickly, I'm glad to see that we're getting more technology, more smart boards in the district. I'm glad to see that the superintendent and the assistant superintendent are making sure that we are continuing to equally distribute our resources across all the elementary schools, middle schools, and whatnot, and that, you know, we're not creating or fostering an environment of the haves and the have-nots, because that has been a concern in the past. And I think we've done a pretty good job, and I think actually that's what this agenda item does do, is continually balance and make sure that we have equality or equity across the elementary schools. My only concern with this is that whether we have to make it part of the bid award or whatnot, is that we attach training for staff in the use of this technology. Because, quite frankly, the feedback that I've heard from teachers in the district is they love the technology, the smart boards and whatnot, but I think a lot of teachers feel as though that, okay, here's your smart board, good luck, you know. And I know that's not the intent, and I know that's not what we're, but I think that a lot of our teachers really want to use this stuff and really would thrive with it, and so would the students. But I just think that they need the support and the training, because they're, from what I've been told by teachers, putting in a lot of hours just trying to figure this stuff out. So, and I know our technology department is strapped as far as being able to provide training. So, you know, perhaps that along with the purchase, we could also buy some training from these companies.
I can address that. Dr. Barbara Morse has provided a number of smartboard trainings in our district. In fact, she's a smartboard certified trainer. So she has done a lot of this, as well as Sue Waterman is an elementary teacher. Actually, I think she just moved this past year to Davisville Middle School. And she is also very tech savvy. In fact, she used to be a tech helper in the district and is now an elementary teacher. And she has done a lot of summer work through the grant work that we've done. So a number of people in the district have been trained on the smart boards. And I know that we have, Dr. Humbert is not here right now. She had to leave. But we have a number of situations in place where we're getting aquasport training as well. So it's happening, but it's not always working out that it comes exactly with the board the day of. So
thank you. I'm glad to hear that. That's something that the administration is aware of and is addressing. Thank you.
Do you have a motion?
Can I have a comment, please?
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
Yeah, a functionality standpoint, I thought that librarians, and the wife would kill me, were titled media specialist also. Librarians,
I believe they are.
media specialist. So are we training our librarians to, for example, operate these types of things and, learn training so that they can be used?
Librarians are trained with smart boards. In fact, we have a smart board in every library that they use on a regular basis.
So my point is, so they could be used to have somebody in the school, each building, to help people learn or train the people to get the smart boards.
Well, that does occur, yes.
Okay.
All right, so do I have a motion to
So
approve
moved.
B?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item C, Mr. Mudge, you took this off the table, so let's go through C1.
Well, no, I just want to talk about everything in general. I see that we don't have any funding data on that, particularly, which is, and the accounts, for example, that these things are being charged to. For example, approval of advisors. Okay, how much money is being budgeted? What's the total budget? I'm really interested in that. And are these advisors for activity funds or co-curricular funds or just curricular programs, rather, or co-curricular programs? I'm just concerned that even with the last issue here, that getting our money wisely, and also not knowing where the funds are coming from and what. I know there's a note in there on some of these, but not all of them, that we're going to TBD because of the union contract. But we don't know the total amounts of the budget, and how do we know we're not going over budget with all these things? First question. And then my second question is, okay, advisors. Are they for activity funds or extracurricular purposes? Because I think you find the budget for extracurricular advisors is up in like $100,000 a year, and I was astounded when I looked at those numbers. So I'm kind of interested in finding out what's in the account. And we have enough to pay the folks.
All of these items are budgeted.
Yeah, but I'd like to know what's in the budget for these accounts.
We don't have that. We don't have that information tonight.
No, I'd like to get that information, okay? And I'd like to know the amount
that we're approving again.
Kim?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Lovendale.
I just have a quick question. Phil, are these all the club advisors in here? I'm just curious.
No, there are a few stragglers, Linda, at the end.
Okay.
There are a
All
few
right.
stragglers that are coming through.
Okay.
And there could be like volunteer ones here and there also.
Okay, yeah, because there were a couple clubs that had in mind that I didn't see. I figured they were at another time or whatever. Okay, I would make a motion to approve. Oh, I'm sorry.
See? You can do that.
I'll make the motion. We can still have discussion.
Right.
Okay, motion to approve.
C?
C. Oh, C1.
No, you can approve all of C. I think that's,
Other questions,
that's
right?
easier for Lorraine to do, right? It's
know what,
easier
if they
for
don't wanna
Lorraine to
exempt
approve all
anything.
C, but we can still go down and talk about each one.
What if we don't, yeah, okay, well,
They would have something in C we don't want to
I
approve.
think I'll hold off on making the motion.
Okay.
Go ahead.
John, Mr. Biscardin.
A couple things. The resignation. Are we allowed to discuss the reason this person resigned?
I don't know.
John, you made a good point. Do we get an exit interview?
Mary Ann, can you-
The superintendent or the special ed director should do an exit interview to find out why the person resigned. Have you done one yet?
This person resigned because she got another job as a full-time teacher in another district.
Okay, thank you.
The position we had for her was .4.
.4, yeah.
Something that you risk when you have those small jobs hanging out there.
So why don't we go down? I mean, John, do you make a motion to approve C7?
Yes, I would move to approve C7.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do we have any other questions on the C3, the advisors?
The advisors.
Just the budget information I'd like to
Right.
get.
Motion to approve C3?
Motion to approve.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Cerisi.
I'm sorry, this list is, I'm just having a little hard time following it here. So we're talking approval of advisors. Sorry, I'm just trying to, it's on several pages here, so I'm just,
You want this, Mr. Cerisi?
that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Right here.
Advisors, that's the co-musical, volunteer for kindness, begin with me. No, this is the, this is not the advisors, this is coaches.
Mr. Cerisi has the advisors. I did it out of my writing back there. One side is advisors and the other side is something else.
Yeah, the C3 is just strictly limited to the advisors. I don't have any questions on that, sorry.
All right, do I have a motion, do we have a motion for C3?
Not yet.
Do I have a motion for C3?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Okay, what is the next, Mr. Jones?
I'd like to talk about C6.
C6, go ahead.
Again, I just note that it's $10,000. We had a presentation earlier today where basically, you know, we had the head of guidance basically say they're struggling with their webpage because it's not obviously her core competency. I would again argue that I'm sure these people are, you know, immersed in it, learning it thing, but I would make a motion that we approve C6 with the proviso that the superintendent, within a designated period to be discussed at a next meeting, come back with what an alternative option to include outsourcing this function would cost and give a cost-benefit analysis of outsourcing this function.
I would second that motion.
I'm sorry, could I ask you to repeat that again, Mr. Jones?
I guess my motion is to approve C6 with the proviso that the superintendent conduct a cost-benefit analysis of outsourcing this function within a period to be determined between the superintendent and the committee at a future meeting within the next month.
seconded by Ms. Fresgarden, right?
Yes.
Any other discussion? Mr. Mudge?
Yeah, I think that, correct me if I think my intent on this would be is to not just look at these individual ones, but our entire website too.
Yeah, the whole
Okay, I mean, so it goes beyond just these positions. In other words, the school website and the whole enchilada. Okay, and these would be part of and everything else. So I just want to make that clear, that what we're talking about is it's starting from the top down and bringing that. Is that what you intended?
May I turn it or? Yeah, my thought would be, because right here you say, the basic question of, one person for the high school. We had someone here who obviously is saying they're struggling, and I don't think it's fault of the high school person. He's got a lot of other stuff he's doing. And, I just say we had discussion about at the education level of needing qualified teachers to teach in subjects. It seems to me, I don't know if anybody is a web expert per se to the level of looking at the whole district's website. Obviously this begs the question of who owns the administration's website, who owns some of these other things. So my feeling is simply, we should look at an alternative option with the cost and benefits and talk about some of the benefits of whether content management is something that can be obviously done by these people, but the web development design and the benefits of having a standardized website across all the schools, so a parent who has children in multiple schools doesn't get lost going between different schools. And again, I think it's in the general function of, can we incorporate students? Can we do a lot of things? But is this a core competency that really belongs to someone else?
Yes, it does. I would agree. I would concur that I'm sure all these folks are real good at what they do. I'd rather have them concentrating on that as opposed to struggling with trying to figure out how to make a letter on the high school website that still has Dr. Foley's name on it.
All right, so we have a motion on the table in a second. Mrs. Avanzato.
Just briefly, I'd like, maybe not right this second, but I obviously would like to hear from the superintendent and how he feels about how this is working and how he might see it working differently. Obviously, that's what this motion is designed to do, and whether he thinks it might work better a different way or...
I'm all in favor of what Mr. Jones is proposing. I just want to talk a little bit about the history of this. This is something that I proposed as assistant superintendent a few years ago. Before that time, we had no one overseeing web page coordination, and it was getting crystal clear that we had fewer and fewer people available to us to do this kind of work. If you were lucky, you could get the attention of someone at the technology office to take care of it. If you weren't, a clerk would try, and we had a difficult website. We have since changed the web portal. That is in the works in terms of getting up to speed, and from what I understand, that is supposed to be a lot easier to use for a content coordinator. I think those of you with any history on the committee know that technology funding is always something that seems to get drawn from when you get into those late hours of budget deliberations. And it's extremely frustrating to me. This is something that I would love to have, whether it's an outsourced group of people or a special person in charge of taking care of this and only this. I would love it.
Great.
So I'm going to look into some options, but this goes along with a lot of the things that we've been talking about. Long-term sustainable technology funding. Right there with the CIP, where whether it's town-driven, school department-driven, that it's money that we commit to and that never goes away, because more and more as we move forward, technology is going to be a bigger and bigger part of what we do. So, and this is a part of it. So I'm all in favor of it.
Great. So we have a motion on the table in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. So next item, how about C5? Any discussion of C5?
C5.
It is the after-school facilitators that are financed with the 20th Century Grant.
Motion to approve?
Motion to- All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of appointments budgeted. This is C4. These are the the art teacher, the social studies teacher, the social worker.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Quick point.
Yes, Mrs. Avanzato.
I don't have my packet in front of me, so I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but I just wanted to comment that I noticed that a lot of the teachers were being hired at step 1, and I just wanted to pass on that that's always a good practice and mention that. I believe I'm in the right place.
Yep, you
Okay. All right, just wanted to say that.
All right, all those in favor of C4, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. C2, appointment of intramurals.
Motion to approve?
Just
Yes.
one question. Fall sessions we paid at $477, spring and winter TBD. Is that amount times the session, or is that the total?
Yeah, that is times the session.
Okay.
What I've tried to do here is to get rid of the practice of announcing every different kind of game or whatever they play, because I don't think that's all that relevant. I think the important thing about intramurals is that students are getting together to play any kind of sport or have any kind of meaningful activity, and it's a good thing. We want the kids there after school doing something productive, and even if it's throwing a basketball around, that sort of thing. We've made it so that we have an equal number of opportunities and programs at each of the schools, Wickford and Davisville. The $477 is the current salary under the current contract. The winter and spring TBD means that we may be under new rules if the contract is negotiated at that point.
Yep.
All right, do I have a motion for C2? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mudge?
Question. When you add this page up, you're talking about a lot of money. We talk $15,000. Where was this where can I find this in the budget?
I'll get that information to you, too. It was all budgeted. Everything that took place last year or the prior year was budgeted the same when it comes to advisors and clubs and programs and everything.
We have one account that all of these advices come out of?
There'll be millions of accounts that goes across all the schools and whatever. I can give you an object number.
Good. It's in the budget. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion on C2?
We have a motion.
Oh, we do.
Oh.
Okay.
We just need a vote.
All those in favor of C2, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. So that brings us to C1. Mr. Sreetser.
C1, approval of appointments for coaches. I think if the committee remembers correctly, the last time we had the high school weightlifting coach position before us, we voted to eliminate it. It's on our agenda for both the fall, which is volunteer, which I'd like a little clarification on that. And it's on, again, for the winter, further down, stipend to be determined. And I know that to be determined is obviously pending the current contract negotiations that are going on. So if I could just, maybe if the superintendent could provide us some background.
The last time
winter weightlifting we talked about?
Actually, two. Yeah. The fall weightlifting and the winter weightlifting.
Oh, we
did.
So why is it back on the agenda?
Well,
We're going to get some background.
Answer that question for
We're
you.
going to get some
that's
background.
what the superintendent's going to answer.
Back in when we were originally doing this in the fall, it was the will of the committee to not approve of the weightlifting coach. After, it is my understanding that the will of the committee was to go to a new contractual formula in which we would have this service that a lot of kids take advantage of, both individuals and on teams, but at a much lower price and in a way that would not even have this person on as a coach. We have not changed the contract yet. In the meantime, this person has been volunteering. I think it's important to acknowledge that. I'm looking to move forward with a TBD like we did with the intramurals. With an so you can do this however you would like to do it. I'm trying to continue having this program in action because I think it's a good thing for the kids, and I think it has been the will of the committee to not have the program completely disappear, but to do it at a much lower price.
Mr.
What is
Cerisi?
the price?
I think I've been discussing this position for 7 years. And we finally had a discussion and a vote to eliminate it, and now we have it back on our agenda again. If the person's been volunteering, why we would need to approve, I don't know. I gave my rationale for this previously, and Dr. Roger, before we took that vote, I had asked you, how many other high schools in the state have this position? And you said none that you're aware of. So, again, it's a kind of a nice-to-have type of thing, but do we need to have it? No, and there are other high schools around the state that have gyms that have weight rooms that don't have this position. I cannot, in good conscience, vote to eliminate teams or cut funding to teams like the hockey team, the gymnastics team, and while at the same time we're going to pay a stipend out of the athletic budget to an individual to fulfill a position that's nice to have, not that we need to have. If I recall correctly, I think the committee said, we can definitely look at other options or hear any issues that may arise. I'm sure this person does an excellent job, and absolutely nothing to do with this person. Like I said, this has been a concern to me for a long time, while we continue to make cuts to athletics and teams and do things like this. So I can't support it, and I'm hoping the committee holds to their position and we don't stop getting into these habits again.
Mr. Biscardin.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Cerisi. I think I understand why it's still on here, but if you back out all the teams to take advantage of the weightlifting, I would prefer that those particular coaches would be there to monitor their team's activities. And if we were to pull that away and do it that way, how much time would this other person actually be there and performing those functions? I don't know, but if I was a gambling man, I'd gamble that not a whole lot. So I think that if certain teams feel that it's important that their team coaches, if there are certain coaches that feel it's important that their team do weight training, that they would be there to supervise that.
I would just offer a motion at this time to approve, is this C1? Is that what it is? C1, with the exception of the fall weightlifting coach, fall weightlifting position, and the winter weightlifting position.
I'd second that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table and a second. I'm going to just weigh in here in that this will be the things that we have already received some student input on, in that they like having some people there, and that we've already received letters from here in the fall. You'll notice that many of the sports have one, maybe two coaches. And so, like, I know for the indoor, boys indoor track, they'll have about 60 kids there with 2 coaches. So it makes it very difficult for there to be any coach in the weight room when you're working with 60 kids. Some who are throwing, some who are running, and they're running various distances. So you may not be able to have those kids go in if there's no coach there. Plus, you have students from a lot of the other sports. Like you'll have the football coaches, and the football team will come in the winter to be training for other sides. So I'm not sure if there will be able to be coverage with a number of coaches that we go down to. So I'm just making the committee aware of that possibility. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. I guess I would echo Mr. Cerisi's point, which is there's probably 30 other schools that have this issue that have basketball teams and track teams. So if they're doing it, we should know about it. If apparently they're not doing it, well, how are they solving the concern that you just raised? The second point, though, I'd like to clarify with Mrs. King is that I know these folks are listed as volunteers, some of them, but some of them are actually being paid, not out of the district general fund budgeted. But I would just like to get some clarity about, which volunteers are actually getting paid, and that we ensure that the flow of funds is donation back to the district, so they are paid by the district, even though the source of funds is a donation, and which coaches on this list are purely volunteer. And the reason I bring this up is not only the accounting point, but a general equity point that we have 4 basketball coaches for the boys, but 3 for the girls. And, I don't know if the boys fundraise to pay for a 4th coach or not. Maybe they do. Maybe we have a 3rd team. I don't know. That this would help clarify some of the discussion. But I do think that in looking at our athletic program in general, we've had issues of teams that have ungodly large rosters and kids aren't playing, that we know some teams need a lot more coverage and not. I think it would be nice to have a discussion or a group that works with the superintendent and, his principals or however else he delegates it to get some kind of standardization of the must-have and then the nice-to-have, so that there's a little bit of appreciation, so we don't have kids fundraising because they just think that we've always had 6 coaches, and give the administration some flexibility to say in a given year that, well, the minimum is 3, we maybe carried 4, but this year the numbers support, we can get away with 3 and we can put funding elsewhere. So, I don't want to hold this up for this discussion, but I think it's a discussion the committee needs to have with the superintendent and any other representative he feels are important. But I would like clarification from Mrs. King through the superintendent as a follow-up on which volunteers are being paid, the source of funds, and how we're ensuring that the district is doing that so we don't get a repeat of what happened last year, where in the paper parents sort of inferred that since they were paying for the coach, they should have some say in it. If the district has accepted this sport, then the district should own it. And the superintendent, through his representatives, should make it clear that they control the sport.
Bill.
Yeah, I want to clarify a couple of things because there's a little bit more to the conversations that have been had. There have been some on the stage and some through negotiations. I think Mr. Cerisi certainly knows because he's on the negotiation committee. I'm going to try to do this in a way that it doesn't reveal, too much of what we are negotiating. But we went into our negotiations with an approach to attempt to fund all of our sports, and at the very least to provide an equitable funding to all sports at a rate that we can afford. We also changed the weight room in that regard. What I said on the stage way back was that coaches for a weight room is not done typically. However, what a lot of school districts have are supervisors for their weight room, and they're not paid quite like coaches are. And what we have been going into our negotiations trying to do is to still have the service, because it's important for safety reasons and for a lot of students outside of their particular team sport. They don't necessarily all just come in with their coach. They come in on their own. And it's a good intramural, or it's just a good activity for a lot of students to stay healthy. And it's something that we do benefit from in a lot of ways. A lot of students do benefit from that. And we took an approach as a committee to try to keep the program, but do it at a place we could afford. So, like Mr. Jones is pointing out, we would be able to afford the coaching staff in an equitable way, and Howie's been very good about these kinds of things and making sure that it's been equitable. He's given us proposals on how, here's a vision of how the whole thing could look like. It's consistent with how people are getting paid throughout the state. It's equitable. It's going to save us money, and be able to get sports like hockey and gymnastics back into the fray. But some of that money is going to come from a reduced cost for the weight room. So what I'm asking the committee is, would you accept another model for the weight room where, that it is not a coach? And if you want me to, I can bring it back to you at the next meeting and explain that the weight room would be on a supervisory basis only, and there will be a certain wage that is much less than, we haven't negotiated that, but, I'm just looking for, or is the instruction to me that we close the weight room?
Dr. Roger, the instruction has never been that we close the weight room, and as you said, you don't know of any other high school in the state that has a weight room coach.
No, you're right.
Okay. So, the sky is falling and the kids aren't going to get to use the weight room is not accurate. They have been using it. They will continue to use it under the supervision of an adult, a coach, a gym teacher, just like every other school district does it. And if for some reason they're being prohibited from using it, then I would be concerned about that, and I would want to know about that, and I would venture to guess that why are they being prohibited to use it?
Well, the other districts that I know of have a supervisor.
They're not going to be able to use it until the school committee votes to approve this. I'm not having any of that. We've voted to eliminate it, and I for one won't vote to reconsider it until there's an actual number that's attached to the position. And I don't want it to get lost in this conversation. I do agree with Mr. Jones, and I would like to know, Mrs. King, whether you can provide it or whether it can be provided through the athletic director, what positions are purely volunteer positions and what positions are being listed as volunteers but are receiving funding, whether it be through whatever, a third party, whether it be student activity accounts, whether it be the boosters, whether it be a donation. I think that the committee needs to have that information, and I think we need to know what positions are volunteer position and what positions are being paid from another source. If we're approving the position, I think we should know that. And we've had this discussion before. This is where we waste time having the same discussions that we've had before, again and again and again. So, lastly, I guess my question would be is related on the same topic as far as given the flexibility of approving a plan. This committee was presented with a plan to have an assistant athletic director at the middle school by Dr. Roger, and the committee supported that plan to give you the flexibility, and we voted to approve it. And then, well, coming back before the committee, the principal over at the middle school made the decision to eliminate that position that you presented to us that we voted to approve. So I guess my question is on what authority does any principal or the superintendent have to reverse a vote of the school committee on a position and on a budgetary line item? And my follow-up question to that would be, what did we do with the money that we budgeted for that position that the school committee voted to approve?
The principal asked me if he could handle this in another way. I told him that would be fine. Okay, that's where he got his approval. Okay, I don't believe I am going against the will of the committee. There have been times when I've brought things to you and told you that I could save you some money by doing things a little bit differently, and I've gotten pats on the back. But suddenly, this is a major league problem.
It's not a problem. Why not?
Well, obviously, you're presenting it like it's a problem.
One person talk at a time, please. One person at a time.
I don't need to be berated by you, Mr. Cerisi.
Nobody's berating you, Dr.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. It's very clear that's what you're doing.
I'm asking you what the committee voted to approve a position that you presented to us.
Right, and I explained why I did it.
And the committee voted...
Let's allow Dr. Roger to answer
Save the district some money. I apologize.
No, that's not the point, Dr. Roger. Let's not go into the victim role. The question question is that this committee voted to approve a plan in a position that you put before us.
Appreciate if you don't raise your voice.
That you put before us. Now, the committee voted to approve that, and we voted to approve a budgetary line item to go along with that position. If this principal or you, the superintendent, changed your mind and wanted to do something else with it, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly acceptable. That makes perfect sense. Why didn't it come back before the committee, is my question. And Mrs. Advisano actually brought this question to you privately, and you berated her.
I did not berate.
Well, we'll let her answer for that. So my question is, I'm not concerned with somebody's feelings or the personalities. I want to know a committee vote was taken.
We are getting off of
I know I'm on topic. I'm on coaches, and I'm on the plan that he brought up, and I'm on the budget. So I'd like to know what was done with the funding that we approved for that position that was eliminated. That's what my question is.
Nothing was done with the funding.
So where is that funding? Do we have a
General budget. Be allocated like all other funds by the school committee.
So did
That's reserved in a budget for that function.
So did the committee take a vote to move that line item in the budget? Because the committee is required to take a vote to move a line item of a budget, to reallocate money to another line item in the budget. We voted to allocate money to a line item in the budget for a position in a plan that you presented us.
Well, it should be a surplus, obviously.
So my question is the position, that's fine. Nobody's arguing the point that the plan changed or you changed your mind or came about it a different way. That's fine. Why was it never brought back before the committee? And the committee asked to approve a new plan or a revised plan?
Okay, we are off the topic.
No, Mrs. Page, I know this is a painful conversation, but it's not off the topic. I think these questions need to be answered. Mrs. Avizano has her hand up, and I think she's the one who first asked the superintendent this
Mr.
question
Mudge.
but couldn't get an answer.
I think Mrs. Avanzano was...
Mrs. Avanzado.
Okay. Starting with how we label some of these things on the agenda, there was a short time back, when we would put volunteer, and I had a discussion with Mrs. Gardner about this. If we were going to then pay the person, it was put back on the agenda with paid, with the amount, and we would approve it that way, so that it was very transparent that way.
Was that through student activity funds, though? Because sometimes what does happen, and I don't think it's all the time, but in talking to Howie Haig, sometimes what does happen is that fully the coach accepts the position as a volunteer. And we're approving them so that, all of our insurances are covered. And then at the end of the year, if they do have some fundraising dollars left, they might be able to pop the coach a few $100 or whatever. So the original intent may not have been, and I'm not saying this happens in all cases, but it does definitely happen in some, that the original intent is that it's a zero.
Right.
But at the end, after they, maybe they had a very successful campaign, maybe their T-shirts were a little bit cheaper, whatever, and then that would go through student activity funds. We would not be able to put through general fund if it had been a volunteer and then paid them. That should not happen, and I have not seen that happen since I was here. So you would really be saying, Mrs. Avanzano, that if they were paid through student activity funds afterwards, for us to come back and inform you of that.
They did do that. They informed us, which I think is all. And
Student
really,
activity funds?
Yeah, well,
okay.
however they were paid, we were told how, and we were just updated on that, which is fine. I'm not looking to. Now, regarding the other issue, I do support when we vote on something that we at least be informed by the superintendent if a change is going to be made. I don't want to get in the way, and I don't want to micromanage this district. I honestly do not. And I believe that Dr. Auger is right to give his principals some latitude in deciding these things. I'm fine with that, but I just feel like we need to be respected as a committee as well. And that's part of that, is respecting the committee's vote and coming back and making sure that, we're okay with it. Just update us even. We're not looking at every little thing has to go back on an agenda even necessarily, but if the committee's informed, I think that that's respectful and is part of the process. That's all I
Mr.
have to
Mudge.
say.
Yes, thank you. We have a confluence of issues coming together on this thing, okay? Because we talked about an activity fund. There are student activity funds, which we have only fiduciary responsibilities for. We can't tell them how they spend the money. It's our responsibility to ensure that they have somebody that's signing and a backup so the kids can spend the money they want. All we get donations. Donations of all, I should have mentioned this before, all supposed to come through the school committee for allocation before they can be used. The third one are called extracurricular activities, they become all school committee funds. School committee funds. And if anything comes out of, and that's why I asked before on the intramurals, who's paying for these coaches? Who's paying for these intramurals? Because those are school committee controlled funds. So I'm going to send this back to you, Mrs. Barron. Okay, because I sent this down because I want a classification. There's almost 300 activity funds in this school district. 300. Now, the important thing about this is, for example, I've got the 13 data here that's wrong. But you realize in the activity fund, there's
Yeah,
11,000.
Mr. Mudge, we are off the topic of the
No, we're
motion
not.
on the table.
I'm suggesting a source of revenue. We had $11,000 in the baseball activity fund is going to be used. We had $10,000 in the boys and girls basketball.
This is off the topic.
We
We'll
had
discuss it
later,
$10,000
Bill.
in
We can
football.
We can discuss it when it's under this agenda, and we should.
Mr. Jones.
My point is, there's a source, and I would request the administration go back and look at the activity funds. They want to fund this, but not out of this taxpayers' dollars right now.
I would just supporting Mrs. Avanzano's point, our own activity procedures say that activity funds are not to be paid to district employees.
Right.
So I would, again, be concerned if activity funds are cutting checks to district employees, which I don't think is the case, but I mean, obviously, so I know we have at least one sport that's funded third party writing the check to the person, which again, I think is an issue that collectively, I just agree with Mrs. Alzano's point, which is, I don't, whether these coaches go into agreement or not, or how it works, and I know maybe at the start we're approving them just to approve them for insurance point, but, whether it's 3 meetings a year with the athletic thing, or however Dr. Auger thinks it's best presented, I do think we need a grip on, if we have volunteers, how are they being paid, if they're not, whether fact, but also, there are some activity of fund spending that the budget subcommittee's talked about where if they're volunteering, but yet the state association dues are due or something, and then are the kids having to pay for those out of the activity fund? So, again, I just think it's a larger issue that we just need to address, and I think Mrs. Avanzano's request is a pretty simple one to come back to.
Mr. Cerisi.
Yeah, I just don't want to intertwine several different topics here. So I guess, and I do want to, I have a motion to make, but I'd like to vote on the motion on the table right now, which was to eliminate this fall and winter weightlifting coach position and approve the rest.
I'm going to support that motion because I feel there's money in the activity
Bill,
funds that
Just
can be
take
used
that's the
if they want to do
motion
it.
is already there. Let's just
I know, but I
take
want
a
to tell you why
vote.
I'm supporting it, because I'm not saying don't do it.
Okay.
There's another source of funds, I'm saying, I think.
All those in favor of approving C1, say aye.
C1 minus fall and winter weightlifting coach position.
Right.
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Mr. Cerisi, you said you had...
Yes, I do. Again, I want to try to tie up these loose ends. Mrs. King, whether it be through your office or the athletic director, could we have a report or some clarification on which of these volunteer positions are purely volunteers or receiving third-party funding?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Sorry. The last question I have is, Mrs. Carroll, it's my understanding that if an adjustment is made in the budget, the school department budget, a line item is adjusted or the committee has to vote to approve that adjustment.
Don't you do that once a year? Don't you every so often?
I'll give you the rules on that, Mr. Cerisi. There are certain thresholds,
Okay,
and
so-
especially if they cross over
My-
different
my-
departments, so I can get you that information.
My-
I don't recall.
My question is, and again, we're not going to...
I don't think that dollar value.
Probably not. You're probably right. I would agree with you
I
on that.
think
And
it's
you would
pretty
know
small.
much better than I would. I guess the question, and I'm not going to allow it to be turned into a personal issue or misconstrued. The question that I have is that a plan came to this committee to approve a position and approve a budgeted dollar amount with that position. We were asked to support that, to give the superintendent the flexibility to do this. We supported it. I supported it. Okay? And I think we should give the principal and the superintendent the flexibility to do these things, and we supported it as a committee. Now, for whatever reason, that decision was whatever you want to call it, changed or modified or whatever, and that's fine. Nobody wants to micromanage things like that. Nobody's asking to micromanage things like that. Nobody's saying that somebody did a bad thing or did a wrong thing. All I am simply saying, and all I think my colleagues are saying here, is that if it was brought to us and you needed us to vote to approve it, and then you decided to revise it for whatever reason after we approved it, at least give the courtesy to the committee of extending us a correspondence or an update, if not even a vote, to revise a decision that you requested by this committee, then at least give us the courtesy of a correspondence to let us know that it's been revised and why it's been revised and where that funding is. And if it can't be answered that what we're using that funding for now, Mrs. King, could you also include that as part of your report? Is where is that dollar amount? Is it back in the general fund? Is it surplus? Did we use it for something else? That's all I want to know. That's my responsibility, policy and budget. Those are the two things that the school committee is responsible for. So when I'm asked to support something and I support it and it gets changed, and then I'm belittled for asking why it's changed or what happened, I don't accept that.
And I agree because, by the way, that's a violation of our policy. We're violating our own rules and regulations. We're violating the town charter.
Common courtesy goes two ways.
Transparency.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our consent agenda. It is my understanding that the committee has said that the CIP is, they are not ready to talk about that tonight.
Correct.
Do you want to talk about the Jamestown proposal tonight?
I'd like to defer that to the next meeting, please. I make a motion to defer that to the next meeting.
Before, Mrs. Clarkin had made a suggestion, and the week's order needed to be made in open session, so.
Yes. So the negotiated revisions to the contract, the proposals, are certainly a step in the right direction. It seems like the big issue here is closing the gap between the audited year that Jamestown pays and the current year that North Kingstown residents pay. So I would propose that we approve the renegotiated contract with the understanding that we continue to renegotiate each year with a goal towards closing that deficiency within, say, a 5-year period. Because, you know, audited numbers may change. There might be other methods of keeping track of, you know, students enrolled that is more current than 2 years past. And it would, you know, just, I think it would make committee members who are looking for that rate that North Kingstown pays, that Jamestown pays in the current year, it's a step in the right direction to see if we can close that gap somehow.
Mr. Viscardi.
Mr. March has his hand up first.
Thank you. Well, you know, Cheryl, we're going backwards. You know why we're going backwards? In 2001, we had a contract with Jamestown. In that contract, I think Town Council President Vernon was ultimately on that. And basically the contract said, and I'll send you the whole documentation I think I have, is that they were paying their freight on the year they paid, and there would be an adjustment at the end of the year. So there was no reason, okay, to go back and use 2-year-old data. especially with our computers and our technology that we have today. Why are we charging, okay, our kids, the parents of our kids, one course in that classroom for that, to pay for, you know, that teacher, and the Jamestown people are paying 5 to 10% less? It's going on too long, okay?
Well, Bill, if that's the case, then why weren't you on the negotiating committee? You know, we gave these people.
I wasn't invited on it. Okay, there was 3 other people on that, and I've been sending this information.
It's a step in the right direction.
It isn't a step in the right direction.
Yes, it is. It's better than what we have now.
No, it's not. Excuse me, I haven't finished. Now, let me give you a couple other things. Why does Jamestown pay a school system, Kingston Hill, $3,000 to $4,000 more a student than North Kingstown pays to send the kid to that same school? Look at that one. Why don't we charge Jamestown, okay, with paying $2 million a year for pension benefits that are against our taxpayers? Jamestown high school is 1/3 of our teacher population, 700 kids, okay? $2 million, 1/3 of that, okay? $2 million we're paying in pension fund benefits that aren't in this program we've overlooked. That's $700,000. Divide that 700,000 by 15%, the general, okay, ratio. That's $100,000 a year we've been losing. That's $1 million right there for 10 years.
Okay,
we haven't
Mr.
even
Mudge,
touched looking into this thing.
I know that you have
okay?
a lot of issues with the Jamestown. I do want to give the committee a little
and
bit of
excuse me, I haven't finished yet. I have not finished yet. I'm sick and tired of
And
getting rolled over because you put this off, and what you did by keeping this off the agenda this year was unconscionable and unethical. You let that roll over purposely so the contract ran out.
It was not purpose. Okay,
It
so
certainly
remember,
was. That's unethical. You've done it 2 years in a row.
In April, the committee asked for this to be on the agenda.
Oh, imagine
So
that. So you put it on the agenda in November after the damn contract has been
It's on the
adjudicated.
agenda, and we asked for a committee to put this together. Mr. Jones nominated himself and Mr. Buscarden, and then the committee decided to add me to the committee. We met in May to discuss this contract. Or I'm sorry, the end of May, June it was. And then we met in July. We met as a group of 3 in July and in August. We met with Jamestown in August. We started to put out a September meeting, and we started having scheduling conflicts in which the 3 of us were not able to get together to meet again. But then we did set up a time to meet with Jamestown. And unfortunately, the times that we tried to meet with them did not work out in the October time, as we threw around a lot of dates. And the next date, when we finally decided that we were able to meet, was November 5th. Now, that is true. It is after the November 1st date. But if you vote on the contract tonight, Jamestown has said that they would be willing to basically backdate that. If you do not vote for the contract tonight, I don't know what Jamestown will say. And you will still have the contract that you have now. We did go round and round with Jamestown many times about bringing the 2-year time that we have the audited amount. And one of the things that we talked about with Jamestown was that we didn't want to get ourselves in the situation where we had charging Jamestown and then at the end of the year find out that we had overcharged them and we had to give money back to them. At the same point, Jamestown said that they did not want to get into the position where basically they didn't pay enough. And so at that point we said that we would try to continue to work towards an audit amount that was closer to 2 years, but it was because we were working with audited amounts, we wouldn't. At that point, all 3 of our committee members said that while we didn't like that answer, we were willing to go forward with what we had. And when we gave our last proposal to them, the 3 committee members, it was something we had agreed on, we gave it to them, and they have accepted what you see here. If the committee does not want to do that, that is fine. But I wanted to make sure that I gave an accounting of the times we have met, the contract. I mean, this has been a very long contract negotiations. in which all three of us were trying to get to make sure that we were on the same page for this proposal.
Well, Mrs. Page, I didn't get any copy of any
Or Mr.
budget
Jones,
committee
is there anything
meetings.
that you would like to add to what I have just said?
Did you have any budget committee meetings that you could pass out the information to tell us what you were negotiating? Because you never told us back in August.
That's true, Mr. Mudge. I did not sit down here and have a meeting in public because I
No,
was
it's a
told
budget
by our
committee
attorney
meeting, minutes.
we had to give it in public if we put it on the agenda, that we could not have it in executive session to talk about what the three of us said. Now, that did not preclude any of the other two members from you discussing it with them to ask where we were in the negotiations.
Well-
So, you're right. I have been remiss in putting this on the agenda until we had some sort of a proposal for the vote. But that does not mean that we didn't coordinate this with the two other members who are on the committee. Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to, on a positive note, recognize our three school committee members who volunteered their time to serve on this subcommittee and put in the extra time to serve on this subcommittee, and our administration as well. I guess maybe I have a simplistic view of it, but our teacher contract negotiations subcommittee, we've reported back to the full committee, whether it be in an executive session, or whether it be an open session, on updates on negotiations, and we've requested direction from our full committee based on those updates. This subcommittee, for whatever reason, maybe reasons I'm unaware of, has, to my knowledge, not met an executive session or open session with this full committee to bring them updates on where these negotiations stand and request some direction from the full committee. That's the process that we follow with all our subcommittees when we have negotiations or whatever the issue has. The subcommittee comes back to the full committee and looks for direction, whether it be an open or closed session. If it's a matter that has to be discussed in open session, so be it. So until tonight, this has never come back to this committee to give us an update on where we stand and request direction from us. So now, conveniently, it's past the deadline, November 1st, and I don't fault Jamestown in this process. It's past the deadline of November 1st, and this committee has been, whether it be intentional or not, been pigeonholed into a position of vote for these changes, or more than likely, there'll be no changes at all, because Jamestown can simply say, we have a contract, it's in effect, it's in force, an enforceable in effect contract, and it's past November 1st. If you wanted changes, they needed to be presented and agreed upon prior to November 1st. So again, we find ourselves in a position where it's this or nothing, and we haven't had a chance to provide the subcommittee with some feedback to say, okay, how about this? How about, like we do with everything else? And I know Mr. Biscottin, I know he's asked several times as far as, meeting with the full committee and getting some direction or updates. And I'm not sure of the logistics or what the scheduling was, but I know negotiation has been ongoing for months, and you can't tell me that there wasn't one time that it could have come back before this committee.
Larry, can I just add one thing to that?
Thank you.
May I add one thing to that, John?
Mr. Buscardi.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Ms. Carroll,
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to explain why we could not speak about this in...
Executive session?
Yes.
There was no exception under the open meeting law that allows the conversation regarding the Jamestown contract to be in executive session. So any conversation about what you were doing with Jamestown would need to be in public session. It's different from the teachers because there's a specific clause in the open meeting law that allows you to talk about contract negotiations, collective bargaining, and we can do that in executive session. So when you're updated on that, you're updated in executive session because there was a clause. But quite frankly, I looked around, I spoke to my colleagues, and we could come up with no exception where you could discuss the details of the Jamestown contract in executive session. It would have had to be an open session.
Could I add to that?
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. I appreciate your You're breaking that down, and so, because you did way better than I could, and it's important that everybody knows why we couldn't discuss that.
Mr. Jones, would you like to say anything about our negotiations?
Larry, I'd just like to add one thing to your comments. When we're in negotiations, we were all asked to give some parameters for negotiations. We never got invited into that conversation, which is upsetting to me. And again, not being apprised of what was going on again during the summer, so we could be on top of this thing, so I could bring things to the committee, which I sent 10,000 comments before. But Mrs. Page, you never asked us to give any
I thought
comments.
that you gave Mr. Jones your comments. I mean, that was the impression that Mr. Jones gave me.
Well, I gave him a few comments, yeah.
I guess as a member of the subcommittee, I would say that Mr. Cerisi and Mr. Mudge are right. And I can only speak for myself to say that it was a learning process for me, but I will definitely take some ownership that my misunderstanding that I thought we could talk about this as a contract, and probably that's my fault that we should have engaged our legal counsel earlier to get clarification, and obviously then say if it has to be open session, open session. So I will definitely take ownership that I, as a member, have let down, those committee members who were not on the subcommittee, and I apologize for that. And so having said that, and what Mrs. Clarkin said, I guess I would say that, I can say either way. We can start over with having learned by the School of Hard Knocks. We can start over by accepting the contract and saying it moves us, albeit very small, forward, and saying that still doesn't preclude us from saying great lesson learned, still points that we need to get from the other committee members, and asking Jamestown, we want to go do this drill again here shortly, and maybe with the points Mrs. Clarkin made about walking in with some other points from the full committee again. So I fully appreciate, again, having let down the rest of the committee. I guess at this point I would only say that since we are where we are, we can accept a little better and try again, or just try again. Either way, we'll can go with however the committee wants us to go.
So is that being made in the form of a motion, Mr. Jones?
No, it's just giving my perspective.
How much are we supposed to be saving with this?
Mr. Westgarten, since you're on the committee.
Thank you. There's like Mr. Jones said, it was a big learning experience for me. I'm not happy with where we're at. We have a gap of approximately $72,000 between what Kingstown residents pay and a year and a half, 2 years in arrears. That's about what the gap is, based on 160 kids, which I believe is close to what we have enrolled here in North Kingstown. The amounts on this proposal that's before us here amount to somewhere in the vicinity of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. That's a glacial lake move, in my opinion, but it is better than nothing. I would rather accept what we have here today in combination with what Ms. Clarkin had suggested, with a little addition, if I may, that we open this up again in March of 2014 for the next go-round.
That sounds like a good idea, Mr. Westgarten. I know Mrs. Avanzato has had her hand up.
Yes, I would like to make that motion. That we accept the proposal that's before us today, and whatever Cheryl said, It's very late. It's very late. I'm very tired.
What you wanted to say with the proviso that this will be started again in March.
And we work towards, and we work to closing this $70-some thousand gap, and we start discussing that as early as March of 14.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Is there further discussion on this motion? Mrs. Avanzato.
Well, it's already all been said. I thank the subcommittee members that put the time in, and I think obviously we need a little bit more time next time, and I think we need to take what we got out of this and not go backwards. Move forward and try to have a good process next time where we look at these issues. That's all.
Lorraine, could you take a roll call vote, please?
Linda Avanzato.
Yes.
Don Biscardin.
Yes.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
Carol Clarkin.
Yes.
Robert Jones.
Yes.
William Mudge.
You may be gaining $7,000 with this, but I'm going to go on record to say we just lost $200,000 of potential revenue because we didn't address this thing back in early June when we should have. Shame on us.
No, Mr.
Shame
Mudge.
on us because it happened 2 years in a row. And I'm not blaming
I need a
Mrs.
yes or no, Mr.
Clarkin
Mudge.
or Mr. Jones either. Okay? One of these things just slid through, cost this town $200,000.
Should that be recorded as a no? No?
I'll vote yes because you're going to save $7,000. The hell, I guess.
Hey, Bill, and come March of next
Continue
year,
with the roll call vote.
let's, you and I sit down and
Yes.
talk about this,
How
okay?
about let's start in January?
Right, it is late, and I think our tempers, we need to seal the executive session minutes from November 12th, 2013. So moved. All, second? Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We need to disclose the executive session votes from tonight's meeting.
Session 1, motion by John Biscardin to approve emergency response plan, seconded by Cheryl Clarkin. Vote was the motion passed 6-1. Session 2, motion by John Biscardin to accept the superintendent's recommendation regarding a student, seconded by Cheryl Clarkin. Vote was the motion passed 5-0 with 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Do I have a vote to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, I motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We already did that.
Meeting is adjourned.
That's